So the second episode of Bleach is in the books, the third Cour that we're going on here. And thank you, Ichigo, for destroying all of Existence now that he's killed the Soul King. But it didn't have to be that way. It's like, come on, my man. Why would you grab the sword? Of all things, you just see the sword and you're like, hey, you know what? Let me save him by pulling the sword out of the crystal. That would definitely save everything, especially the fact that his father is a doctor. Don't you realize the stab victim, you don't take it out? You don't pull it out immediately after you've been stabbed. You know, you keep it in so then that way you can go and seek medical advice. You don't just pull it out. Ichigo, come on, man. Good episode as far as setting up a lot of things that's going to be happening soon. And then I definitely will go over the differences because there was quite a few in this episode that kind of changed the flow of the episode, which they've done in the past. But first things first, make sure you guys like the video and make sure you guys are subscribed if you haven't already. And of course, the full reactions uncut are going to be over on Patreon, so check that out as well. But let us get into what was Ichigo thinking. Now, of course, through this fight scene that Ichigo was having with Yhwach, he definitely was feeling himself. He's straight up like, oh, I got this. I got this. And he's straight up like, look at this. He's standing superior over as Yhwach's on the ground. He's like, man, it's over. It's done with. I've just used one of my new get to go moves. It is done, son. And then Yhwach's like, about that though, I wasn't even using my ability. And if you carefully look, you will actually see that he hadn't. When they started the fight, like, of course, when Ichigo shows up, he has his almighty power on. And then when they start battling, he turns it off. And then, of course, turns it back on again. Like you can see here, even from the beginning when he fired his first Getsuga Tensho, which I gotta say, I love the fact that the Getsuga Tensho, like he just says it so smooth. Like when, you know, growing up with Bleach, he just screams it. He's like, Getsuga. And then he finishes it up with Tensho. But then here, he's just like, yeah, Getsuga Tensho, and then fires it. It's like, oh, so smooth with it. Okay, I see you, Ichigo. Throughout this whole fight, especially in the beginning, he had his regular eyes. So I will have to say that Ichigo is powerful enough to defeat Yhwach, like in his regular form. Like especially when back when Yhwach destroyed Ichigo's sword, like he wasn't powerful enough then, but he is powerful enough now to where old dude has to use his broken move, the Almighty, just to, I guess you could say, survive, if you will. I know we didn't really go into more of the Almighty ability last week because I wanted to wait until we see some actual action, because last week was mainly a whole lot of recap and just, you know, a little bit here and there. Not too much new stuff, but this episode was a whole lot of new stuff. And yes, the Almighty is completely broken. Like, it is not even fair. The fact that he can see like all realities of like what happens and dodge to whatever the way he wants it to, and then he could choose the will of way things are going to fit his narrative as well. So it's just essentially as if he breaks the fourth wall and straight up is like, yeah, I'm going to change the story and all of the show to the way that I want it to be, and then go back into it. So it's completely broken of a move, but what can you do? It's like, you got to find some way around it. Ichigo doesn't do that and ends up being the one to destroy or / kill the Soul King. Like, come on. You see the sword, it's literally impaling the Soul King, and the first thing you do is to go over and grab it. You're like, oh, I gotta get it out of him. Oh man. Especially when you reach, it's like, oh, he's not dead yet. He's still fine. But Ichigo's like, nah, son, I'm gonna make sure he's okay. He's grabbing the enemy's sword. It's just right there. Yes, it's impaling him. Why are you going to touch it? It's like, this is probably the dumbest move that Ichigo has done to date at this moment in time. of all the things, you're all this powerful, all this stuff. As soon as Yhwach's like, okay, he's still alive, it's like, all right, cool, what's the plan? You know, start devising a plan, not like instantly grab it and pull it out. And then of course it's the enemy sword, so it resonated with his blood, you know, the spiritual power in the sword resonated with the Quincy blood that's in him, and of course wants to take out the Soul King, because apparently the Soul King, like when Yhwach was saying that he was his father, kind of like I said last week, that it seems like the Soul King being the creator of all, but then kind of ostracized the Quincy's, and that's where the beginning of the episode where you see like Yhwach was like casted out and then had the 1,000 years to revive, if you will. And then of course we are led to this moment here. So yeah, I can understand why he wants to take revenge on the Soul King, you know, for what has happened in the past, but I still can't get over how stupid Ichigo was in this. Regardless of what is happening here, we definitely need to go into the differences, because I will have to say the differences that they've done and they've chosen in this episode has kind of changed, not necessarily changed the narrative, but kind of changed the order of things. So first things first, this whole fight sequence was completely added in. As soon as Ichigo had gone to see Yhwach in front of the Soul King, in the manga, like they just run up there, they see him, they talk about his eyes, and it's like, oh, his eyes look a little weird. And then they see the Soul King in the background, and of course it's impaled. Ichigo immediately goes to grab the sword. So the whole fight sequence where Ichigo attacks Yhwach and they have their exchange, which was pretty much most of this episode, all of that was added in. So it wasn't something that was in the manga, which honestly is fine, because, you know, it was a great fight sequence. We kind of could see how the growth of Ichigo and of course his abilities and such, but all of that was new for the show. And the reason why I believe the fight scene was added more so into this episode was mainly because in the manga, the focus was a lot about Urahara and in the lab. So of course he's in the lab, he's doing a whole bunch of stuff that I'm not really gonna go into detail as far as what he's doing, because I believe they're gonna save that for next week's episode. Because this week was mainly more about the fighting, then next week they're probably going to talk more about what's happening in the lab and the plan that they have implemented. But the lab was a big focus more so because, like I said, Ichigo went straight for the sword and went straight forward, cutting the Soul King down. So the lab was the big focus of Urahara's plan, what he's planning to do. So the scene where it shows Rukia meeting up with the captain, Soifon and such outside of the lab, that was kind of more extended. There was a lot of jokes and stuff happening there at the expense of Soifon's lieutenant, and of course he's carrying his sister. So there was a lot of exchange happening there, even before they walked into the lab. And then once they walked into the lab, they spoke with Urahara. He's telling them what his plan is, what he's trying to do, which was left out of this episode. And they even commented how there's actually an order that's been sent out from the science division to all captains and pretty much anyone in Sarate to stop all fights, that even if you're in the middle of a fight, to just break away and report to the lab. So that wasn't even mentioned in this episode. So everyone is supposed to be going to the lab for whatever reason. And Urahara kind of explains later why they're going to the lab. You see it very slightly, but you see this character in the background who was introduced to several other people as they walked into the lab as Yurichi's little brother. So there was a lot of introductions and a lot of stuff that's happening. And that's the reason why I say that the lab was kind of the focus here in the manga, with the fact that it wasn't so much in the anime and they introduced a whole lot of the fight scenes. My guess is that next week it's going to talk more about the lab, talk about Urahara and what he's planning to do, and what is going on now that the Soul King is dead. So not necessarily a bad thing, more so. I kind of don't want to go into details about what they are speaking about because I believe it's going to be talked about more so next week and that they're just kind of changing the order of things. Regardless, the fight scene was amazing. It was good to see Ichigo like kind of pop off a little bit, albeit for a little bit until he's introduced to the Almighty and just kind of used and abused after that point. But it's still Bleach, and we're still getting at the beginning of the season. There's a lot to go through. There's a lot of the season's going to showcase, and a lot of good fights that are going to be even more amazing once it's animated, especially with the fact that they added so much into this episode. I'm looking forward to way more fights happening in the future. And I know there's a lot of people that have read the manga that are looking forward to several of the fights as well. So that's pretty much it as far as we can talk about here for right now, but definitely sit back and relax, because this is going to be a really good season if they not only hold true to the manga, but expand upon it with added scenes. And it's going to be amazing. So anyway, that's going to be it as far as for the analysis for this week. Like I said, not a bad episode, and poor Ichigo, but it is what it is. And we shall see what happens as things go on. But tell me what you guys think in the comments down below. But make sure, remember, no spoilers. But I definitely would love to have a conversation with you guys about what's happening here. And make sure, of course, if you're new, to hit the subscribe button, because I'd love to see more of you guys in the future. In the meantime, you guys be safe. Take care. And Lord willing, I will see you next time. Have a good one. Bye for now.
This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.